The Story of the Other Wise Man by Henry Van Dyke. Preface. It is now some years since this little story was set afloat on the sea of books. It is not a man of war, nor even a high-sided merchantman, only a small, peaceful sailing vessel. Yet it has had rather an adventurous voyage. Twice it has fallen into the hands of pirates. The tides have carried it to far countries. It has been passed through the translator's port of entry into German, French, Armenian, Turkish, and perhaps some other foreign regions. Once I caught sight of it flying the outlandish flag of a brand new phonetic language along the coasts of France, and once it was claimed by a dealer in antiquities as a long-lost legend of the Orient. Best of all, it has slipped quietly into many a faraway harbor that I have never seen, and found a kindly welcome, and brought back messages of good cheer from unknown friends. Now it has turned home to be new-rigged and fitted for further voyaging. Before it is sent out again, I have been asked to tell where the story came from and what it means. I do not know where it came from. Out of the air, perhaps. One thing is certain, it is not written in any other book, nor is it to be found among the ancient lore of the East. And yet I have never felt as if it were my own. It was a gift. It was sent to me, and it seemed as if I knew the giver, though his name was not spoken. The year had been full of sickness and sorrow. Every day brought trouble. Every night was tormented with pain. They are very long, those nights when one lies awake and hears the laboring heart pumping wearily at its task and watches for the morning, not knowing whether it will ever dawn. They are not nights of fear, for the thought of death grows strangely familiar when you have lived with it for a year. Besides, after a time you come to feel like a soldier who has been long standing still under fire. Any change would be a relief. But there are lonely nights. They are very heavy nights. And their heaviest burden is this. You must face the thought that your work in the world may be almost ended, but you know that it is not nearly finished. You have not solved the problems that perplexed you. You have not reached the goal that you aimed at. You have not accomplished the great task that you set for yourself. You are still on the way, and perhaps your journey must end now, nowhere, in the dark. Well, it was in one of these long, lonely nights that this story came to me. I had studied and loved the curious tales of the three wise men of the East, as they are told in the golden legend of Jacobus de Voragine and other medieval books. But of the fourth wise man I had never heard until that night. Then I saw him distinctly, moving through the shadows in a little circle of light. His countenance was as clear as the memory of my father's face as I saw it for the last time a few months before. The narrative of his journeyings and trials and disappointments ran without a break. Even certain sentences came to me complete and unforgettable, clear-cut like a cameo. All that I had to do was to follow Artaban, step by step, as the tale went on, from the beginning to the end of his pilgrimage. Perhaps this may explain some things in the story. I have been asked many times, why I made the fourth wise man tell a lie in the cottage at Bethlehem to save the little child's life. I did not make him tell a lie. What Artaban said to the soldiers he said for himself, because he could not help it. Is a lie ever justifiable? Perhaps not. But may it not sometimes seem inevitable? And if it were a sin, might not a man confess it and be pardoned for it more easily than for the greater sin of spiritual selfishness or indifference or the betrayal of innocent blood? That is what I saw Artaban do. That is what I heard him say. All through his life he was trying to do the best that he could. It was not perfect, but there are some kinds of failure that are better than success. Though the story of the fourth wise man came to me suddenly and without labor, there was a great deal of study and toil to be done before it could be written down. An idea arrives without effort. A form can only be wrought out by patient labor. If your story is worth telling, you ought to love it enough to be willing to work over it until it is true. True not only to the ideal, but true also to the real. The light is a gift, but the local color can only be seen by one who looks for it long and steadily. Artaban went with me while I toiled through a score of volumes of ancient history and travel. I saw his figure while I journeyed on the motionless sea of the desert and in the strange cities of the East. And now that his story is told, what does it mean? How can I tell? What does life mean? If the meaning could be put into a sentence, there would be no need of telling the story. Henry Van Dyke. You know the story of the three wise men of the East, and how they traveled from far away to offer their gifts at the manger cradle in Bethlehem. But have you ever heard the story of the other wise man, who also saw the star in its rising, and set out to follow it, yet did not arrive with his brethren in the presence of the young child Jesus? Of the great desire of this fourth pilgrim, and how it was denied, yet accomplished in the denial, of his many wanderings, and the probations of his soul, of the long way of his seeking, and the strange way of his finding. The one whom he sought, I would tell the tale as I have heard fragments of it in the hall of dreams, in the palace of the heart of man. The sign in the sky. In the days when Augustus Caesar was master of many kings, and Herod reigned in Jerusalem, there lived in the city of Ecbatana, among the mountains of Persia, a certain man named Artaban the Median. His house stood close to the outermost of the 7 walls which encircled the royal treasury. From his roof he could look over the rising battlements of black and white and crimson and blue and red and silver and gold, to the hill where the summer palace of the Parthian emperors glittered like a jewel in a 7-fold crown. Around the dwelling of Artaban spread a fair garden, a tangle of flowers and fruit trees, watered by a score of streams, descending from the slopes of Mount Orontes, and made musical by innumerable birds. But all color was lost in the soft and odorous darkness of the late September night, and all sounds were hushed in the deep charm of its silence, save the flashing of the water, like a voice half sobbing and half laughing under the shadows. High above the trees, a dim glow of light shone through the curtained arches of the upper chamber, where the master of the house was holding counsel with his friends. He stood by the doorway to greet his guests, a tall, dark man of about 40 years with brilliant eyes set near together under his broad brow, and firm lips graven around his fine, thin lips. The brow of a dreamer and the mouth of a soldier. A man of sensitive feeling, but inflexible will. One of those who, in whatever age they may live, are born for inward conflict and a life of quest. His robe was of pure white wool, thrown over a tunic, and a white pointed cap with long lapels at the sides rested on his flowing black hair. It was the dress of the ancient priesthood of the Magi, called the fire worshippers. "Welcome," he said in his low, pleasant voice, as one after another entered the room. "Welcome, Abdus. Peace be with you." "Rhodasphes and Tigranes, with you, my father. Argabus, Abgarus, you are all welcome, and this house grows bright with the joy of your presence." There were 9 of the men, differing widely in age, but alike in the richness of their dress and many-colored silks, and in the massive golden collars around their necks, marking them as Parthian nobles, and in the winged circles of gold resting upon their breasts, the sign of the followers of Zoroaster. They took their places around the small black altar at the end of the room, where a tiny flame was burning. Artaban, standing beside it and waving a barsom of thin tamarisk branches above the fire, fed it with dry sticks of pine and fragrant oils. Then he began the ancient chant of the yasna, and the voices of his companions joined in the beautiful hymn to Ahura Mazda. "We worship the Spirit divine, all wisdom and goodness possessing, surrounded by holy immortals, the givers of bounty and blessing. We joy in the works of his hands, his truth and his power confessing. We praise all the things that are pure, for these are his only creation. The thoughts that are true, and the words and the deeds that have won approbation, these are supported by him, and for these we make adoration. Hear us, O Mazda, thou livest in truth and in heavenly gladness. Cleanse us from falsehood and keep us from evil and bondage to badness. Pour out the light and the joy of thy life on our darkness and sadness. Shine on our gardens and fields. Shine on our working and weaving. Shine on the whole race of man, believing and unbelieving. Shine on us now through the night. Shine on us now in thy might. The flame of our holy love, the song of our worship receiving." The fire rose with the chant, throbbing as if it were made of musical flame, until it cast a bright illumination through the whole apartment, revealing its simplicity and splendor. The floor was laid with tiles of dark blue veined with white. Pilasters of twisted silver stood out against the blue walls. The clear story of round arched windows above them was hung with azure silk. The vaulted ceiling was a pavement of sapphires, like the body of heaven in its clearness sown with silver stars. From the 4 corners of the roof hung 4 golden magic wheels, called the tongues of the gods. At the eastern end, behind the altar, there were two dark red pillars of porphyry. Above them, a lintel of the same stone, on which was carved the figure of a winged archer, with his arrow set to the string and his bow drawn. The doorway between the pillars, which opened upon the terrace of the roof, was covered with a heavy curtain of the color of a ripe pomegranate, embroidered with innumerable golden rays shooting upward from the floor. In effect, the room was like a quiet, starry night, all azure and silver, flushed in the east with rosy promise of the dawn. It was, as the house of a man should be, an expression of the character and spirit of the master. He turned to his friends when the song was ended and invited them to be seated on the divan at the western end of the room. "You have come tonight," said he, looking around the circle, "at my call as the faithful scholars of Zoroaster, to renew your worship and rekindle your faith in the God of purity, even as this fire has been rekindled on the altar. We worship not the fire, but him of whom it is the chosen symbol, because it is the purest of all created things. It speaks to us of one who is light and truth. Is it not so, my father?" "It is well said, my son," answered the venerable Abgarus. "The enlightened are never idolaters. They lift the veil of the form and go into the shrine of the reality, and new light and truth are coming to them continually through the old symbols. Hear me then, my father and my friends," said Artaban very quietly, "while I tell you of the new light and truth that have come to me through the most ancient of all signs. We have searched the secrets of nature together and studied the healing virtues of water and fire and the plants. We have read also the books of prophecy in which the future is dimly foretold in worlds that are hard to understand. But the highest of all learning is the knowledge of the stars. To trace their courses is to untangle the threads of the mystery of life from the beginning to the end. If we could follow them perfectly, nothing would be hidden from us. But is not our knowledge of them still incomplete? Are there not many stars still beyond our horizon? Lights that are known only to the dwellers in the far southland, among the spice trees of Punt and the gold mines of Ophir." There was a murmur of assent among the listeners. "The stars," said Tigranes, "are the thoughts of the eternal. They are numberless, but the thoughts of man can be counted, like the years of his life. The wisdom of the Magi is the greatest of all wisdoms on earth, because it knows its own ignorance. And that is the secret of power. We keep men always looking and waiting for a new sunrise, but we ourselves know that the darkness is equal to the light, and that the conflict between them will never be ended." "That does not satisfy me," answered Artaban. "For if the waiting must be endless, if there could be no fulfillment of it, then it would not be wisdom to look and wait. We should become like those new teachers of the Greeks who say that there is no truth, and that the only wise men are those who spend their lives in discovering and exposing the lies that have been believed in the world. But the new sunrise will certainly dawn in the appointed time. Do not our own books tell us that this will come to pass? and that men will see the brightness of a great light. That is true, said the voice of Abgarus. Every faithful disciple of Zoroaster knows the prophecy of the Avesta and carries the word in his heart. In that day, Socios, the victorious, shall arise out of the number of the prophets in the east country. Around him shall shine a mighty brightness, and he shall make life everlasting, incorruptible, and immortal, and the dead shall rise again. This is a dark saying, said Tigranes, and it may be that we shall never understand it. It is better to consider the things that are near at hand, and to increase the influence of the Magi in their own country, rather than to look for one who may be a stranger, and to whom we must resign our power. The others seemed to approve these words. There was a silent feeling of agreement manifest among them. Their looks responded with that indefinable expression which always follows when a speaker has uttered the thought that has been slumbering in the hearts of his listeners. But Artaban turned to Abgarus with a glow on his face and said, My father, I have kept this prophecy in the secret place of my soul. Religion without a great hope would be like an altar without a living fire. And now the flame has burned more brightly, and by the light of it I have read other words which also have come from the fountain of truth, and speak yet more clearly of the rising of the victorious one in his brightness. He drew from the breast of his tunic 2 small rolls of fine linen, with writing upon them, and unfolded them carefully upon his knee. In the years that are lost in the past, long before our fathers came into the land of Babylon, there were wise men in Chaldea, from whom the first of the Magi learned the secret of the heavens. And of these, Balaam, the son of Beor, was one of the mightiest. Hear the words of his prophecy. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall arise out of Israel. The lips of Tigranes drew downward with contempt as he said, Judah was a captive by the waters of Babylon, and the sons of Jacob were in bondage to our kings. The tribes of Israel are scattered through the mountains like lost sheep, and from the remnant that dwells in Judea under the yoke of Rome neither star nor scepter shall rise. And yet, answered Artaban, it was the Hebrew Daniel, the mighty searcher of dreams, the counselor of kings, the wise Belteshazzar, who was most honored and beloved of our great King Cyrus. A prophet of sure things, and a reader of the thoughts of God, Daniel proved himself to our people. And these are the words that he wrote. Artaban read from the second scroll. Know, therefore, and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore Jerusalem unto the Anointed One, the Prince, the time shall be 7 and 62 weeks. But my son, said Abgarus, doubtfully, these are mystical numbers. Who can interpret them? Or who can find the key that shall unlock their meaning?